Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we've got a really fascinating one for you. We are heading way back into the year 2278.
Yeah, it's a great era to look at.
It really is.
Huh.
And we are out in this very remote sector of space, just hugging the very edge of the Federation and Klingon neutral zone.
Right on the border.
Exactly. And, I mean, if you look at the port window in this sector, you don't see those sparkling, pristine star bases you're used to seeing in the travel brochures. You just see the deep, cold dark.
It's the frontier in the truest sense.
Yeah, and honestly, it looks a little rough around the edges out there.
It really does. And lurking in that dark is the scenario that military historians honestly just lose sleep over. We are looking at a confrontation today that isn't just a mismatch, it's practically a statistical impossibility.
Yeah, we've all heard the David and Goliath analogy, right? It's a cliche for a reason.
Right.
Usually when we picture that, we think of the clever hero outsmarting the giant with a slingshot and, a prayer. But in the scenario we're analyzing today, David is flying a rust bucket held together by duct tape, and Goliath is driving a tank that's effectively on fire and just screaming for blood.
That is a disturbingly accurate summary. We are digging into the source material from Diane Carey's novel Ship of the Line today.
Which is such a fantastic source.
It's a goldmine. And the reason this text is so crucial for us isn't just the space battles, though those are incredibly intense. It's the texture of the story. It totally strips away that polished flagship veneer of Starfleet and shows us the rust underneath.
Right, the working class side of things.
Yeah.
Which is the core mission for this deep dive. We want to really understand that blue-collar reality of Starfleet. These are the working class ships that do the dirty jobs while the Enterprise gets all the headlines.
Exactly. But to do that, we also need to dissect the psychology of the enemy here, because this isn't your standard territorial dispute or resource grab.
No, not at all.
This is a war fueled by a very specific, very dangerous emotion: envy.
Envy. Yeah, that struck me right away. It's such a human emotion, or I guess Klingon emotion in this case.
Envy weaponized with the disruptor cannons. It is a highly volatile mix.
So set the board for us. We aren't on the Enterprise. We aren't on the bridge of a ship that smells like fresh carpet and Earl Grey tea.
Far from it. But before we even get to our heroes, we really have to start with the threat. We need to get inside the head of Commander Kozara.
The villain of the piece.
Right. He is captaining this massive Klingon warship called the Sosoi Tuj.
Which translates to Mother's Name, right?
It does, yeah.
Which sounds incredibly sentimental for a Klingon warship.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing he's not exactly the sentimental type.
Well, he is, but in a very twisted Klingon way. Kozara is a man driven by this deep visceral envy, like we mentioned. We actually first meet him on the bridge of this massive warship staring at the view screen.
Right.
But he's not looking for enemy ships or plotting coordinates. He's just staring across the border into Federation space.
This stood out to me immediately in the source text. He's looking at the stars themselves.
Exactly, and this is where the text gets really psychologically rich. He describes space as sort of boiling out before them. He sees the distant stars of the Federation, these yellow and pink stars, planets, that he describes as bubbling with progress.
Bubbling with progress, wow.
Yeah, and then he looks at his own hand. He has this crippled hand. And he actually says out loud, even their space is better than ours.
That is such a heavy line.
Yeah.
Even their space is better. I mean, it's not just that he thinks the Federation has better ships or better shield technology. He literally believes the actual cosmos on that side of the border is superior.
It's a massive psychological projection. He sees the nebulae, the thousand luminaries, these sparkling anomalies, and he just feels that the Klingons have been relegated to the dull, static corners of the galaxy.
But they got the bad real estate.
Exactly. He believes the Federation, quote-unquote, has everything and that his people are being kept in their place.
It's basically the grass is greener syndrome, but totally weaponized.
Precisely. It is an inferiority complex on a galactic scale. And that envy is the absolute fuel for his aggression here. He isn't attacking just for strategic gain. He's attacking to physically smash the thing that makes him feel inferior.
Right.
He literally wants to etch his success on the gravestones of 50,000 Federation dead.
Which is such a chilling motivation. It's not about territory at all. It's purely about validation. He wants his son, Zayden, I think his name is, to have a famous father.
Because glory is the currency of the Klingon Empire,
Yeah.
and Kozara feels bankrupt. He's not an old man, but true glory has just completely escaped him his whole career. He needs this desperately.
And because he needs it so badly, he doesn't just charge in. He concocts this grand deception. Let's look at this plan because it's actually incredibly clever. It's a classic misdirection.
It really is. It's a two-stage setup entirely designed to manipulate Starfleet's standard operating procedures. Kozara knows how they think. Stage 1 is pure sabotage.
Right, the spies.
Yeah, Kozara has had Klingon spies infiltrating Starbase 12 for months, and they've managed to cause a massive power shutdown. The entire base is running on emergency power only.
Which means no weapons, no shields.
Exactly. It's a sitting duck, just 50,000 people floating in a tin can. But a sitting duck is no good if the hunter gets caught by the game warden before he can even take the shot. So stage 2 is the diversion.
He leaks information about a border dispute in the Benicia sector.
Right. He creates a completely fake crisis. He gets a chunk of the Klingon fleet to muster out there just to look threatening and bang their shields together. And what does Starfleet do?
They react exactly how he wants them to.
Of course. The entire sector fleet, including the legendary USS Enterprise, rushes off to Benicia to prevent a full-scale war.
Leaving the back door completely wide open.
Wide open. Kozara plans to cut right through the Typhon Expanse, which is this quiet backwater sector, and just obliterate the defenseless Starbase 12. And the only thing standing in his way is empty space.
Or so he thinks.
Or so he thinks.
Which perfectly brings us to the heroes of our story. And I use the term heroes pretty loosely here, because when we meet them, they do not look like the heroes we are used to seeing on the screen. Enter the USS Bozeman.
Ah, the Bozeman. This is where the story really finds its heart.
Yeah.
So this is a Soyuz-class vessel.
And for the listeners who track starship design, the Soyuz is basically a variant of the Miranda class, right? Like the USS Reliant from Wrath of Khan.
That's the one. But the Soyuz is the uglier, meaner cousin of the Reliant.
It's got that big roll bar on the back?
It does, but it's more than just the roll bar. It has an extended hull at the rear, extra sensor pods, and all these turreted phasers. It is explicitly designed for longer patrols and heavier surveillance than a standard science vessel. Captain Bateson actually calls it a knotted fist.
A knotted fist. I love that. And this particular fist has clearly been punching brick walls. The ship is just beat up when we see it.
Yeah. It's an absolute mess. They are recovering from a nasty fight with some smugglers. The source text has this amazing sensory description. It says, the bridge smells of burned circuits, raw insulation, and, quote, a heavy blunder of lubricants.
A heavy blunder of lubricants. You can almost smell that. It's not the sterile, clean bridge of the Enterprise. It smells like a garage.
It smells like hard labor. And the command chair, the captain's literal throne, is torn. The leather is actually ripped. Systems all over the bridge are jury-rigged.
Or jerry-rigged, as the engineer fiercely argues.
Oh, yeah.
I laughed out loud at that part. Even in the middle of emergency repairs, they are arguing about etymology.
It perfectly shows the character of this crew. They're smart, they're bored, and they're deeply cynical. This is the Coast Guard of space. They aren't out there seeking new life and new civilizations. They are stopping bad guys from smuggling Romulan ale across the border.
And Captain Morgan Bateson, Bulldog Bateson, he seems to completely embody that entire ethos. He is such a character. He's described as highly theatrical and adaptable. He wears different personae, most of the costumes.
He's a total shapeshifter in terms of his leadership personality. He can be the proper gentleman one minute and a street-level brawler the very next. He adapts to whatever the crew needs him to be in that exact moment.
And right by his side, keeping him grounded, is his first officer, Gabriel Bush. Gabe.
Gabe is the anchor of the ship. He's a down east of Gloucester boy. He has this deep nautical heritage. You can trace his family all the way back to the British Navy in the Napoleonic Wars.
He brings that really old world naval tradition out to the stars. In fact, the whole atmosphere on the Bozeman is a deliberate throwback to the 18th and 19th centuries. Like, they literally drink rum tots at the change of watch.
Which I think is technically against about 36 Starfleet regulations.
I was going to say, that can't be strictly legal.
Why not? But on a border cutter, way out on the fringe tradition is the glue that holds the crew together. It's spiced rum with cinnamon and vanilla.
Gabe says it's from his grandmother's recipe, right?
He does. It grounds them. It reminds them that they are sailors just like their ancestors who sailed the Atlantic.
And the food. We have to talk about the food. They're constantly joking about cornflake stew and baby cod.
It's pure gallows humor. The humor of people who do dangerous, dirty work for a living and don't get thanked for it. They talk about eating scrade, which is supposedly some creature that lives in the sewage dump. It's just gritty and it feels so real.
And we absolutely cannot forget the mascot. Because nothing says serious military vessel, like what was it exactly, a decapus?
George Hill,
Uh,
yes, a decapus at
no.
10 tentacles, no suction cups. He essentially looks like a piece of the carpet that just suddenly came to life.
And he just wraps around people's ankles.
He's a constrictor, so he just kind of hangs out on the bridge, tripping the crew up, wrapping around the captain's leg while he's trying to give orders. It is so absurd, but it really adds to this feeling that the Bozeman isn't just a military asset, it's a home.
A very weird, dysfunctional, messy home.
Exactly.
And it's such a stark contrast to the philosophy of the flagship. Bateson actually gives a lecture to two new crewmen, Lieutenant Dennis and Specialist Wolf. And he really lays the whole philosophy out for them.
He does. He sits them down and tells them we are not explorers. That is a massive distinction to make to a Starfleet officer.
Because that's the whole pitch of Starfleet, right?
Exactly. The Enterprise is out there seeking, but the Bozeman is the castle guard. They aren't the knights errant riding off on glorious quests to slay dragons. They're the ones standing out in the rain at the gate, making sure nothing bad gets in while everyone else sleeps.
He points out that they use physical clamps instead of tractor beams just to save energy. They operate at short range. They are the absolute working-class cogs of the machine.
It's a philosophy built entirely on efficiency and necessity. They don't have the luxury of waste, and they certainly don't have the luxury of glory. They are there to do a very specific job, and usually that job is completely invisible to the rest of the Federation.
Until it isn't. And this is where the source material takes a major shift. We get this incredible scene where the Bozeman actually has a brush with greatness. The USS Enterprise flies right by them.
This scene is just masterfully written to highlight the contrast we've been talking about. The Enterprise is fresh from a major refit. It is shiny, it's powerful, it's massive. Bateson looks at it on the screen, and he waxes totally poetic.
He quotes poetry, doesn't he?
Yeah, he calls it a bright phantom of the night. He is genuinely in awe of the sheer design of the thing.
But Gabe Bush has a very different reaction. He just sees a big, clean ship with much better amenities.
He sees the science labs, the massive recreation decks. He sees a ship where the coffee probably actually tastes good and the sonic showers don't constantly break down. It's such a human reaction.
It's very much a must-be-nice kind of moment.
Oh, yeah. It's the guy driving the beat-up 20-year-old pickup truck sitting at a red light next to a guy in a brand-new luxury sedan.
And then the Bozeman gets hailed by Admiral James T. Kirk himself.
The absolute legend. But here is the tragic irony of the scene. Kirk is rushing away from the actual danger. He's falling completely for Kozara's fake diversion. He genuinely thinks the Bozeman is perfectly safe staying behind in this quiet sector.
The conversation between them, though, is really interesting. There's a lot of mutual respect there.
There really is. Kirk explicitly acknowledges that Bateson has more hand-to-hand experience with Klingons in the last 6 years than any other single commander in the fleet.
Which totally validates the whole blue-collar fleet concept.
Exactly. Kirk might be the fancy admiral on the flagship, but he knows exactly who is out there doing the dirty work in the trenches every single day.
They even have this great banter about Scotty. Bateson jokingly calls him the galaxy's foremost, hindmost.
And Kirk fires right back that Scotty sends his most blistering criticisms regarding the Soyuz class design. It's just a lovely moment of real connection between two captains who speak the exact same language, even if their ships are worlds apart.
And then Spock actually beams over.
Right, to drop off those two new crewmen, Dennis and Wolf. And the description of Spock in this chapter is fascinating. He's described as supremely Vulcan, of course, but also surprisingly accessible.
Yeah, Bush fully expects him to be this cold, emotionless computer, but he's actually quite warm.
It really breaks the cold Vulcan stereotype. Spock has been around humans long enough, specifically Kirk and McCoy, that he has developed a distinct warmth to him. He treats the entire Bozeman crew with genuine respect.
He even participates in their weird traditions. He drinks the rum tide.
He does, which is amazing. He takes a tot, smells it, nods his approval, takes a drink, and hands the cup back.
That is a fantastic detail.
It's a profound gesture of solidarity. He's quietly acknowledging and respecting their unique naval tradition.
But then the visit ends. The Enterprise powers up its massive warp engines and warps away.
Leaving the tiny Bozeman completely alone in the dark.
And then the silence.
Immediate and total silence. The very second the Enterprise leaves sensor range, the Bozeman's communications are completely blanketed. Just a total blackout. Wiz Dayton, their comms officer, suddenly can't get a single signal out.
And that's the first real clue that something is very wrong.
Right. Because why would comms suddenly go completely dead the exact second the big dog leaves the yard? It's not a coincidence. And then the sensors pick it up. A massive energy signature.
64.9 enrichment.
Which is astronomical. It's not a lost shuttle. It's not a smuggler running on fumes. That is a capital ship power curve. And then they finally see it on the screen, the Sosoi Touge.
The text describes it as having hull plates the color of Newfoundland ice.
Which is such a brilliant choice of words. It connects right back to the envy theme, that cold, bitter feeling. And it also connects to Gabe Bush's Gloucester background. He literally sees the cold, dangerous, unforgiving ocean reflected in the armor of that ship. And it is 5 times the size of the Bozeman.
A true Goliath. And Wolf, the new science officer, uses some new interpretation methods to scan it. And he sees exactly what it's carrying in its base.
Jettison salvos.
Now explain that for the listeners. What are jettison salvos exactly?
They are incendiary weapons. These aren't precise phaser banks meant for disabling a ship's engines or surgical strikes. These are primitive, brutal weapons designed for non-surgical mass destruction.
It's just pure fire.
You drop them and they burn absolutely everything in a massive radius. They are weapons of sheer terror. You don't use jettison salvos to fight a nimble starship. You use them to burn a city to the ground. Or a starbase.
So Bateson starts quickly connecting the dots.
He's a tactical genius in his own right. He identifies the ship's name. He knows it's Kozara's mother's name. He knows Kozara's reputation as a massive glory hound. So he asks the million-dollar question out loud.
Right. Why would a glory-hungry Klingon sneak through a quiet backwater sector with a massive warship packed to the brim with incendiaries?
And the realization hits the bridge like a ton of bricks.
Starbase 12.
They were going to obliterate Starbase 12.
The horror of that specific moment in the text is palpable. They realize that the Bozeman, this beat-up jury-rigged border cutter with a ripped chair and a carpet monster, is literally the only thing standing between those firebombs and 50,000 innocent people.
People who currently have no shields and no weapons because of the sabotage.
It is the absolute definition of a nightmare scenario. You are the castle guard holding a rusty sword, and a massive dragon just showed up at the gate.
And the dragon is already breathing in.
So what do? Do they run? Do they hide and hope the dragon passes them by?
No. Bateson hails them.
This is one of my favorite parts of the whole story. David actually hails Goliath.
He opens a short-range channel right to the Klingon bridge, and the banter starts immediately. Kozara sees this tiny ship and calls Bateson dog.
And Bateson fires right back and calls Kozara butterfly.
Butterfly. It is such a spectacular insult for a Klingon warrior. It implies he's fragile, flighty, insubstantial. It directly attacks his vanity.
So Kozara tries to lie, right?
Yeah, he tries to play it off. He claims he has engine trouble and needs navigational assistance. It is such a pathetic, transparent lie, and Bateson just laughs right in his face. He says, "What a bag of bilge."
And then Bateson tries the bluff of the century.
He stands up and announces with full absolute authority that he is going to officially impound this massive Klingon warship.
I can just imagine the dead silence on the Klingon bridge before they all just burst out laughing.
Kozara is completely incredulous. He says, "You and that will detain me in this." It's utterly absurd to him. It's like a kid on a tricycle trying to pull over a military tank.
But Bateson knows it's a bluff. He knows it's not going to work.
He absolutely does. He's just buying seconds. While he's talking big to the screen, he's quietly whispering out of the side of his mouth to his helm officer. Plot evasive.
Because he knows the fight is coming in seconds.
And he knows something else, too. He knows this is a suicide mission. There is no mathematical way they survived this. And in that moment, he turns and apologizes to Gabe Bush.
I'm going to miss your wedding.
That line just hits so incredibly hard. It takes this huge abstract concept of duty and sacrifice and suddenly makes it painfully personal. It's not just about dying in a fiery explosion. It's about the life unlived. It's about Gabe's fiancée waiting back home in Gloucester, who is never going to see him again.
So the bluff predictably fails. The channel closes and the fight begins. And this is where we get into part 6 of our deep dive, tactical asymmetry.
This whole sequence is a masterclass in how a significantly smaller force engages a massive one. The disparity in firepower is just huge. The Klingon ship fires its main disruptors, and the Bozeman is shaken violently just by glancing hits.
The text says mere glancing hits are enough to almost tear the hull apart.
Yeah.
If they take one direct hit to the center mass, it's instantly over.
So they absolutely cannot go toe-to-toe. They can't just sit there and trade punches. They have to dance.
Exactly. And Bateson uses the environment perfectly. They're inside a solar system.
Yeah.
So he uses the planetary geography. He realizes the Klingon ship is heavily armored, but it's sluggish.
Yeah, Bateson accurately calls it a waterlogged hog.
So he uses that sheer mass against them.
He employs a tactic he calls planet locking. He forces the Klingon ship into what he calls the pi wedge between two planets.
Explain that visual to me. What exactly is the pi wedge?
Sure, so imagine the solar system as a series of concentric orbital lanes like a track. If the Bozeman stays in the incredibly tight spaces directly between these massive planetary gravity wells, the Klingon ship can't turn fast enough to follow their path without swinging super wide.
Right, because of its massive momentum.
Exactly. It's like a guy on a nimble little motorcycle dodging through tight city traffic while a massive 18-wheeler tries to keep up. The semi-truck has to take these huge, wide turns just to avoid hitting the buildings, while the motorcycle can just weave right through the narrow alleys.
So they are buzzing around, basically using the gravity wells and the orbital paths to keep Kozara from ever getting a clean target lock.
But it's still desperate. The Bozeman is taking an absolute beating. Systems are failing everywhere. There's thick smoke on the bridge. The engineering team down below is literally improvising just to keep the warp core from breaching.
I remember the line where someone yells, "Take a club to those joiners."
Yeah, they are physically beating the ship's bulkheads back into shape with heavy tools. And Bateson is just yelling from the center seat, "Keep the pot boiling." He absolutely refuses to let the crew give up or slow down.
But they can't keep this up forever. They were running out of tricks, and they were running out of ship.
No, they can't. They know they can't stop the Klingon ship from eventually reaching the starbase. They can only delay it. And the terrible irony is that if they die, the communications blanket Kozara is using will likely lift, but by then it might be way too late for the distant fleet to turn around and return.
So they realize they need a Hail Mary.
They need to get a message out to the fleet right now, but the comms are entirely blocked by the jamming field, so they come up with the hard shell plan.
The hard shell plan.
Right.
What is a hard shell in this context?
It's a physical communications probe. Think of it like a highly advanced message in a bottle, but strapped to a sublight engine. They can record a distress message, launch the physical probe, and hope it gets far enough away from the jamming field to broadcast.
But if they just shoot a probe out of the torpedo tube, won't Kozara see it immediately on his sensors?
That is exactly the problem. If Kozara sees a tiny probe launch from the Bozeman, he'll just swat it out of the sky with a low-power disruptor blast. He has target lock on everything in the vicinity.
So they have to find a way to hide the launch completely.
Right. They scan the area and find what they call a sensor blind. It's a very small funnel of space that is temporarily blocked from the Klingon sensors by the mass of a large gas giant planet.
Okay, so they have to maneuver the ship into that tiny blind spot, launch the probe into the funnel, and then immediately veer away and keep fighting to look innocent.
Exactly. But even that isn't enough, because if the probe starts broadcasting its distress call the second it leaves the ship.
Kozara picks up the local signal and destroys it before it clears the system.
Exactly. So they have to set a timer on the probe.
A timer.
The probe must remain totally silent for 30 minutes. It has to travel at sublight speed, completely dark and quiet, until it gets far enough away from the Sosoituge's weapons range. Then, and only then, after 30 exact minutes, it will activate and scream for help.
But that setup creates a horrifying condition for the crew of the Bozeman.
It creates the 30-minute death sentence.
Because if the Bozeman is destroyed before those 30 minutes are up,
Kozara will have no more distractions. He'll likely do a standard sweep of the area, see the silent probe floating there and kill it. Or worse, he'll just warp directly to the starbase unhindered and drop the firebombs before the probe even wakes up.
So to save the starbase, the Bozeman doesn't just have to successfully launch this probe in secret. They have to somehow stay alive and keep Kozara actively distracted for 30 full minutes.
They have to be the bait. They have to make Kozara so furiously angry, so obsessively focused on killing them, that he completely ignores the rest of the sector. They have to endure 30 uninterrupted minutes of absolute hell, knowing that even if they succeed, they will almost certainly be dead when the help finally arrives.
That is just intense.
It is the ultimate unfiltered definition of duty. Captain Bateson's final order in the outline sums it up so perfectly. He says to the crew, distract Kozara for 23 more minutes. If we live 30 minutes, I'll die happy.
And Bush's response to that order,
and I'll die unmarried.
it just completely breaks your heart.
It really does, because it captures the sheer tragedy of the situation so cleanly. They aren't dying for glory. They aren't dying to be remembered in a song. They are dying so that a tiny machine can float in the dark for half an hour.
Let's take a step back and look at what this whole narrative tells us about heroism in the broader Star Trek universe. We are so used to the Enterprise swooping in at the last second, firing a spread of precise phasers and saving the day with literal seconds to spare.
Right. The Enterprise represents the ideal. It represents the Federation at its absolute peak exploration, diplomacy, science, hope. But the Bozeman represents the gritty reality of actually maintaining that utopia.
It's the difference between the mayor at the ribbon-cutting ceremony and the guy who sweeps the street at 2 in the morning afterward.
Exactly. The Federation is incredibly vast. It has massive borders, and those borders are inherently dangerous. The blue-collar Starfleet, the border service, they're the ones who have to deal with the nasty smugglers, the petty warlords, and the deeply insecure, glory-hungry commanders like Kozara. And they don't get the parades.
And they clearly don't have the equipment either.
That is a key point in Carey's writing. Heroism on the Enterprise often involves using a cutting-edge deflector dish to expertly modify a tachyon beam and solve a space anomaly. Heroism on the Bozeman involves using a literal sledgehammer to keep a structural bulkhead from collapsing on your head.
It's gritty. It's incredibly physical.
And it is driven by a fundamentally different kind of loyalty. They aren't loyal to some grand mission of exploration. They are loyal to the line of scrimmage, as Bateson calls it. They are loyal to the people sleeping safely behind them, the civilians on the starbase.
I want to talk about the villain again for a second. Kozara, we talked a lot about MB. But this is also a massive story about the danger of ego in leadership.
Kozara is a walking warning sign. He is exactly what happens when personal ambition completely overrides basic strategic sense. A truly rational military commander would have just ignored the Bozeman entirely.
Right.
He would have realized that a tiny beat-up border cutter couldn't possibly stop a massive warship. He could have just raised his shields and flown right past them at warp speed, straight to his target.
But his ego just wouldn't let him do it.
He couldn't. His fragile ego simply wouldn't allow the dog to bark at him without consequence. And Bateson knew that. Bateson played him like a fiddle. He knew that by insulting him, by calling him Butterfly, by bluffing about impounding his ship, he could easily goad him into a senseless dogfight.
So Bateson effectively weaponized Kozara's own psychology against him.
Exactly. The Bozeman's greatest weapon in this fight wasn't its phasers or its failing shields. It was Bateson's deep understanding of Kozara's deep-seated insecurity. He turned the Klingons' desperate need for dominance into a fatal trap. A trap that cost the Bozeman everything, of course, but saved the starbase.
It is a tactical victory, won almost entirely through psychological warfare.
And through sheer stubbornness. I mean, the Bulldog nickname isn't just for show. Bateson latched onto Kozara's leg and just absolutely refused to let go no matter how hard he was kicked.
I want to go back to the crew dynamic one more time before we wrap up. The whole idea of the working-class ship. How do you think that changes how we view the Star Trek universe as a whole?
I think it makes the universe so much richer. It makes it feel like a real functioning society. If everyone in Starfleet is a philosopher king like Picard or a swashbuckling cowboy poet like Kirk, it feels a bit, well, feels artificial.
Too perfect.
Right. Knowing that there are regular guys out there like Gabe Bush who worry about paying for their wedding and drink spiced rum and make terrible jokes about baby cod, it completely grounds the future. It tells us that fundamental human nature doesn't miraculously change just because we invented warp drive.
We still have anxiety. We still have bad bosses to complain about. We still have dirty, grueling jobs that someone has to do.
And we still have courage. Not necessarily the courage of the grand speechmaker on the flagship, but the quiet courage of the person who just holds the line in the dark, because that's what the job requires today.
You know, the hard-shell probe is such a great metaphor for this whole story. It's this small, silent, fragile thing that carries the absolute truth.
And it requires immense patience. That's the other big thing here. The space battle wasn't won in a glorious flash of light and a cheering bridge. It was won by enduring, by just agonizingly watching the clock tick down. Imagine being a junior officer on that bridge.
It would be terrifying.
The smoke is literally choking you. The ship is violently shaken apart. You can hear the actual hull plates groaning under the stress. And you aren't firing back. You are just watching a digital timer on a console. 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
Knowing that every single minute you manage to survive is another minute the probe gets further away into the safety of deep space.
And knowing that if you get blown to pieces at minute 29, it might all be for absolutely nothing. That is a level of psychological pressure that is genuinely hard to comprehend.
It really puts the deep dive.
It certainly does.
So as we finally wrap up this exploration of the Bozeman and her crew,
Yeah.
what is the biggest takeaway for you from this text?
For me, it's the profound power of the underdog. And not in the cheesy, cliche cinematic way, but in the harsh, practical way. The Bozeman definitively proved that you do not need the biggest, newest, best ship to be the absolute most important ship in the sector. You just need to be in the exact right place with the exact right attitude and possess the willingness to sacrifice everything.
And maybe it helps to have a decapist named George Hill hanging around.
He certainly helped keep the morale up.
He did. It is a fantastic story about the blue-collar heroes. The ones who never get the statues built in their honor, but who make damn sure the statues are still standing for the next generation to see.
Well said.
I want to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought today. We talk a lot about advanced technology on this show. Warp drives, quantum torpedoes, multiphasic shields. But in this incredibly high-stakes story, the absolute most critical weapon in the entire quadrant ended up being a simple timer. A stopwatch.
And the willingness of a crew to endure 30 minutes of hell.
Exactly. So here is the question for you to mull over. In a vast universe of infinite power and unimaginable speed, would you have the patience, the sheer grit to be the Bozeman? Would you be willing to make that terrible trade, to hold the line in the freezing dark just to buy time for someone else you'll never even meet?
That is the ultimate question of duty, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Ship of the Line. We will see you out there in the stars.
Safe flight out there.